Today's spoiler video is brought to you by Card Kingdom. Use the link below to pre-order your cards today. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of War of the Spark spoilers. And we've reached the final week of War of the Spark spoilers, and we kicked off the last week with a card that we've all been waiting for, the new Nicol Bolas. That's going to be the first card we talk about today, but before we jump into it, a couple of quick reminders. First, for all your preview needs, check out mtgpreviews.com, and secondly, if you enjoy the video, it would be super cool if you take a second, click that subscribe button down at the bottom of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's talk some sweet new War of the Spark cards, starting with Nicol Bolas DragonGod, a new mythic Planeswalker, 5 mana in the Grixis colors. You know, a lot of black mana, triple black mana, and this one is super spicy. So first off, the static ability. Nicol Bolas DragonGod has all the loyalty abilities of all the Planeswalkers on the battlefield. So any Planeswalkers you have, or your opponent has, Nicol Bolas has all their loyalty abilities as well. And then you can +1 to draw a card, and each opponent exiles a card from his or her hand or a permanent that they control. -3, you destroy a creature or planeswalker. -8, each opponent who doesn't control a legendary creature or planeswalker loses the game. Loses the game! And this card is super, super powerful. So first off, one thing people have been talking about, and this was one of the leak cards, is the ability to use the static ability to do some funny things where you kind of use Nicol Bolas to steal like Jace's Cunning Castaway's ability to make a bunch of Nicol Bolases with Oath of Teferi going infinite, doing super crazy things. That's pretty fun. That's pretty exciting. However, that's kind of like an against the odds thing. The more spiky aspect of this card is being able to steal your opponent's planeswalker abilities is pretty absurd. Like in standard, if your opponent plays Teferi, you can play Nicol Bolas, use Teferi's -3 ability to tuck your opponent's Teferi as if it was a Teferi, and get rid of the Teferi, or just start drawing cards if you want to. You could use Dovin Grand Arbiter's plus ability to rush to the ultimate. If you have a bunch of creatures, tick up Dovin style, get a bunch of loyalty counters on Nicol Bolas, and then you're able to ultimate quickly, hopefully make your opponent lose the game. You can mimic a Karn Liberated 1+4 would get Nicol Bolas DragonGod from starting loyalty all the way up to 8, so the next turn you could ultimate and win the game. So I feel like the static ability is the most fun aspect of the card. However, it's probably the least relevant. Like, even if that static ability wasn't a thing, this card is very strong. +1 is basically a weird take on Disinformation Campaign, essentially a 2-for-1. That's even more than a 2-for-1 because you still have a Nicol Bolas, but you're going up a card, your opponent's going down a card, and you get to do that every single turn. -3 gives you that Hero's Downfall effect, getting rid of whatever your opponent has that's troubling you, and then the -8, if that comes up, is going to be insane. It is just a great win condition. We often say that Planeswalker Ultimates win the game. Well, this one literally wins the game. There's no gray area here with Nicol Bolas God Dragon. Yes, you do need to make sure your opponent doesn't have any legends, but if you're playing Grixis Control, which would probably be the most likely home for Nicol Bolas DragonGod, you're going to have removal, you're going to have counter spells, you're going to have Planeswalker removal, so you can just keep ticking up, getting that Disinformation Campaign mode to draw a bunch of cards, keep pressuring your opponent, and then -8, use your removal to get whatever's left off the battlefield, win the game after a few upticks. So I think Nicol Bolas DragonGod is basically like Grixis Teferi. This card is incredibly powerful if you are in Grixis and you're playing a mid-ranger control deck. Nicol Bolas DragonGod is the reason to do it, and that doesn't even include just all the spicy, fun jank stuff you can do with the static ability. Where you play Super Friends, Nicol Bolas DragonGod has like 10 loyalty abilities, 20 loyalty abilities. You can put together weird combinations of stuff and just really go to town. So Nicol Bolas DragonGod, one of my favorite cards from the set. It's fun from a jank perspective, it's good from a spikes perspective, it hits basically everything, and was definitely worth the wait to the last week of spoiler season. Along with Nicol Bolas DragonGod, we got a couple of spells associated with Nicol Bolas. The Elder spell, 2 mana, sorcery, destroy any number of target planeswalkers, choose a planeswalker you control, put 2 loyalty counters on it for each planeswalker destroyed this way. So this is basically a Plague Wind for planeswalkers, except you get to control exactly how many planeswalkers die, and then it's also a way that you can boost the loyalty on your own planeswalkers. So of course, since this doesn't hit creatures and only hits planeswalkers, it is a little bit of a metagame card. I mean, we have a ton of planeswalkers coming with War of the Spark. I probably wouldn't play this in my main deck in the current meta, because sure, it's great when you're killing a Teferi for 2 mana, and absurd if you're killing a Teferi and a Karn for 2 mana, but then some matchups don't have any planeswalkers. However, in War of the Spark, there's going to be a lot of planeswalkers running around, and this is the answer to all of them. So just having this be a 2 mana, one-sided planeswalker wrath is insane, but that isn't even the full picture on the Elder spell, because it allows you to rush the ultimate with your planeswalker. So let's imagine this situation. We're talking about Nicol Bolas just a minute ago. You play Nicol Bolas, you have, let's say, 7 mana available, which isn't that crazy. You use the Elder spell to kill 2 of your opponent's planeswalkers. You put 4 more loyalty counters on Nicol Bolas DragonGod. You just killed all your opponent's planeswalkers. You immediately, the turn Nicol Bolas DragonGod comes into play, -8, and your opponent loses the game. That's a 7 mana I win the game combo, essentially, which is pretty powerful. And that doesn't even include the other planeswalkers that rush to ultimate. Angrath starts at 4, goes up to 8. So killing 2 planeswalkers gets it to ultimate. Jace Welder of Mysteries, same deal, from 4 to 8. Ral Izzet Viceroy. You could get there with 1+ and then killing 1 planeswalker with the Elder spell to get up to a game-winning ultimate. So I feel like that is the part of the Elder spell that is especially scary. Like, sure, killing your opponent's stuff is great, a little matchup dependent, but the real thing is you can get to planeswalker ultimate so quickly, and that's maybe the most exciting part of this card is, remember, you can hit your own planeswalkers. So while it's probably not the dream scenario, if you're playing a Super Friends deck, you get around the situational aspect of the Elder spell because all of a sudden you're horrible planeswalkers, like Tibalt, the Fiend-Blooded, Tibalt, Rishik, Instigator, the really bad planeswalkers. They have a purpose. They are +2 loyalty for your good planeswalkers when you hit them with Elder spell. So this card is a safety valve to keep planeswalkers from getting too out of control in Standard. It is 2 mana, one-sided planeswalker rest. So if your opponent's going to go all in on Super Friends, this is the answer, while it's also a combo piece, letting you kill your bad planeswalkers, your uncommon planeswalkers about to run out of loyalty, to put more loyalty counters on your good planeswalkers, ultimate them and win the game. So this card, it's super sweet. It is super spicy. I don't think it's what was expected by many people for the Elder spell, but good lord is it powerful, and I'm super excited to build around it. Next on our list, we have an uncommon planeswalker in Ashiok Dream Render. So 3 hybrid Dimir mana, 5 loyalty, makes it so basically our opponents can't search their library. Spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause their controller to search their library. So I guess they can search if you like Ghost Quarter them or Field of Ruin them, but their stuff can't make them search. And then -1, you mill target player for 4, and then exile all of your opponent's graveyard. So Ashiok, it's a weird card. This is a card that I feel like might be more relevant for Modern than for Standard. So basically, what you're getting is a one-sided Mindlock Orb. A Mindlock Orb that doesn't hurt you, combined with a Memory Slice, I guess, like milling for 4, and a repeatable Tormod's Crypt for 3 mana. And this is a pretty powerful combination of abilities, just not as much in Standard. Like, in Standard, what does this really do? I guess you hose Arclight Phoenix decks by exiling the graveyard. That's something. I guess Chemister's Insights that are in the graveyard, kind of like a bad Kaya. You hose half of Mastermind's Acquisition, though searching the library half, but your opponent can still grab cards from their sideboard with the second mode. So I don't know what Ashiok really does in Standard. I expect people will try to build mill decks with it, and I expect that those people will be disappointed that Ashiok's not actually good in the mill deck, or that the deck itself isn't that good. On the other hand, hand, in Modern, Ashiok hits on a lot of things. So most obviously, it shuts off your opponent's fetch lands. And if you can get Ashiok down on turn 2, maybe with a mana dork of some kind, you can potentially lock some decks out of being able to hit their mana. They're going to have their shock lands in hand, and when some decks play 8 to 12 fetch lands, that's a huge chunk of their mana base that's suddenly being cut off by Ashiok, and that doesn't even include the random stuff you hit on, like Expedition Map, tutoring up Tron lands, Scapeshift, winning the game in Valakut, Whir of Invention for the Whir Prison deck, so that your opponent's can't search ability is relevant in a lot of matchups thanks to fetch land, and particularly devastating in certain matchups that are based on tutoring stuff from their library. And then the mill part, it's good graveyard hate. That's basically where it comes down, similarly to Kaya in Modern, where being able to exile the graveyard helps against Phoenix decks, helps against Dredge, helps against incidental decks like Gurmag Angler decks out of Death Shadow. Ashiok has some potential there. So while I have a hard time imagining that Ashiok will be a main deck card in Modern, or even a card at all in Standard, maybe a fringe sideboard card, this does seem like a card that has a lot of potential in a sideboard in Modern, since it's fairly disruptive. Graveyard hate is already very good in the format, and you can randomly just get people with the ability to lock people out of searching their libraries. The only downside is, the way it's worded, you can't use it offensively. You can't do the Leonin Arbiter strip mine you with Ghost Quarter play, because you're forcing the opponent to search their library, so you can't use it as offensively. You gotta use it fairly, essentially, which, I mean, that's still fine, but it does minimize some of the things you can do with it. But still, a combination of being a hoser against some popular decks searching their libraries, and being graveyard hate, which is good against a huge chunk of decks in Modern, means that Ashiok actually has a chance in the format. Being 3 mana, the slowness is concerning, but it does a lot of interesting things that might put it in the conversation for sideboard slots. Next up, we have a little common in Spark Harvest. 1 mana is an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature or pay 4 more mana, destroy a creature or a planeswalker. That's right, potentially 1 mana common planeswalker destruction. So this is basically a strict upgrade on Bone Splinters. Bone Splinters is a card that, it doesn't usually take over the formats it's in. Sometimes it shows up, sometimes it doesn't. But this is a big upgrade because you can cast it, although not efficiently, for 5 mana without sacking a creature, and you get to hit planeswalkers as well. So I think Spark Harvest is a card that I expect 2 things. First off, I expect it to be overplayed. I expect people to play this card in deck where they shouldn't. You don't want to have to sack a creature to kill your opponent's thing. That is not something that the typical deck in Standard wants to do, or in Limited for that matter. On the other hand, in certain decks, this card is great. If you're playing Afterlife cards, it's great. You have free sacrifice fodder. Same with Hunted Witness. Same with cards like Gutter Bones that are coming back from your graveyard. So if you have the free sacrifice fodder, or you're playing an Aristocrats deck with Cruel Celebrant, Judas Scourge Diva, Tisa Karlov, then all of a sudden Spike Harvest kind of has the upside of allowing you to sacrifice a creature, and when you can sacrifice a creature for free, so to speak, then Spike Harvest is insane, killing a creature or a planeswalker of your choice for just a single mana. So I feel like people are going to play this in decks they shouldn't, but in the decks you should play this in, with those free sack outlets, Aristocrats decks, Spike Harvest is great. The good news is, in non-sacrifice decks, we have plenty of options to go planeswalkers. Assassin's Trophy, Bedevil, Vraska's Contempt, and for the most part, those are going to be more optimal than sacking a creature that you really want to keep around. If you got to sack your big Wild Growth Walker, or you got to sack a huge Jadelight Rager, or your Crackly Drake to kill a planeswalker, something went wrong in the deck building process. So Spark Harvest is a card for specific niche archetypes, but in those archetypes, it's going to be very, very strong and very impressive. Next on our list, we have Commence the Endgame. 6 mana, instant speed, rare that can't be countered. You draw 2, then you amass X, where X is the number of cards in your hand. And this card, at first glance, other than super awesome Noah Bradley art, you see it and you're like, okay, draw 2 for 6, can't be countered, whatever. But really, when you think about this, this is a card that reminds me of Enter the God Eternals, where it is an amass card that is at its best in a non-amass deck. With Commence the Endgame, you don't really want to be putting the counters on a random army you already have. You want to be making an army token. Same with Enter the God Eternals. And the good news is, when you are doing that, Commence the Endgame, it's like a Phyrexian Gargantua or a Muldrifter. It's going to be 6 mana, make a 4/4 or a 6/6 or an 8/8, depending on the deck you're playing. A huge creature that also draws you 2 cards, and that seems extremely playable, especially when you consider it's an instant speed and you can flash it into play, which makes it even more powerful. If one goes to attack you, you all of a sudden out of the blue draw a couple cards, make this massive zombie army, eat your opponent's attacker. So I think Commence the Endgame, it definitely has potential in Standard. It's a card that might not read as powerful as it is, but I think that once people start playing, you could see this showing up in control decks. With Teferi and Chemist's Insight, where your hand's going to be full, you're untapping your lands, you're casting this as instant speed to draw even more cards and have your finisher. In Wilderness Reclamation decks, where you can do the tapping and untapping, draw cards, make massive creatures. So I feel like this card is going to play way better than it reads. I think when people read it, they're like, draw 2 for 6, amass, that's not that good. But when you think that in the right deck, this is often going to be instant speed, draw 2, flash a 4/4, a 6/6, and 8/8 into play, maybe even kill one of your opponent's attackers. I'm pretty high on Commence the Endgame in the right decks, in those control decks with Teferi, in those Wilderness Reclamation decks. This is a card draw spell that is also a finisher and very, very powerful. Anything that looks even a little bit like Muldrifter is worth keeping in mind. Also probably going to be like a limited staple. Next up, we got Deliver Unto Evil, a card that it's hard to rate, but boy is this art amazing. This is probably the best art from the set. Seth MacKinnon is insanely awesome when it comes to making Magic art. Oh man, we need more Seth MacKinnon art, because that is insanely sweet. So, Deliver Unto Death, 3 mana, choose 4 cards in your graveyard. If you control Bolas, they just all come back to your hand. Otherwise, your opponent chooses 2, and you get the 2 that they don't want you to get, essentially. So you're 2 worst out of the 4. So, obviously, if you got a Nicol Bolas out, this is insane. It's a draw 4, your 4 best cards from your graveyard for 3 mana, which is incredibly powerful. On the other hand, if you don't have a Nicol Bolas out, I'm not sure how good this card is, honestly. It reminds me a little bit of a Gifts Ungiven, essentially, that works from your graveyard rather than from your library. The question's going to be, how much can you stock the graveyard? Can you get enough good targets into your graveyard to make this be worthwhile? I think it's definitely possible. There is some competition like Find Finality that just gets you back 2 creatures of your choosing for 2 mana rather than 3 mana. But in the right deck, this seems like it has a lot of possibilities. Could even be some sort of combo piece in older formats. I mean, Gifts Ungiven has a long history of setting up combos. Maybe being able to Gifts Ungiven from your graveyard is going to be enough. So combine that with just, oh man, my favorite art from the set, and it's a super sweet card. Next up, we got Jace Planeswalker stuff. Not really exciting. Planeswalker deck Jace stuff. The Jace Tutor, Jace's Protection, Guildpact and Forbit, a really bad Thrumming Bird. So if you want to pick up a Planeswalker deck, it's a fine starting point. None of these cards going to be relevant for Standard, though. And then we got some lower rarity stuff. Ashok's Skulker. Too expensive. Limited card. I guess it can be a clock and limited. Huatli's Raptor. Not bad. 2/3 for 2 is fine-ish stats with Vigilance. It is a dinosaur. When it comes into play, you get to proliferate. So maybe a proliferate deck enter the battlefield thing. I don't know. The stats are good enough that it could show up in Constructed. And then Spark Reaper, a 2/3 for 3, lets you sack a creature Planeswalker for 3 mana to gain a life and draw a card. I've been asking for more sack outlets. That's just too much mana. 3 mana is asking a lot, but still, maybe a limited type thing, but nothing for Constructed. Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our daily War of the Spark spoilers for today. So let me know what you think. How busted is the new Nicol Bolas? Is that the next Teferi? What about the cards that go with Nicol Bolas? Our new Planeswalker Plague Wind, how good's that going to be? What about Ashiok? Can that card make waves in Modern? Spike Harvest, can the 1-mana Planeswalker removal show up in Standard? How about Commence the Endgame? How good is that going to be with its amassing at instant speed, making huge creatures? Deliver Unto Evil, can the reverse Nicol Bolas version of Gifts Ungiven actually show up anywhere? What do you want to combo off? How do you combo off with it? The other stuff, let me know about that as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.